Alyssa, the floor is yours. Be broad in your question.
Okay, so I have a couple of students that are middle and high school, have a trauma history, extensive trauma history, and we're seeing, I'm going to use air quotes, behavior, because I know it's related to trauma, affecting their ability to do their job as a student completely, like majorly, and they want assistive technology support. So I'm curious about, and again, like I've done this very extensive occupational therapy eval, but I'm curious about what, if anybody else has this intersection of life trauma, even before COVID life trauma, plus really where I see it impacting them is, for my purposes, executive functioning.
Yeah, I have not seen that specifically, but I was going to say, I would imagine most of your focus will be executive function. And then you just said that. So yeah, I was thinking that was where you were going to go with most of that. What kind of requests did they make within that AT request? Like, what would they like to see happen that's not happening?
Fix them.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a piece of cake. Let me find my book, my fix them book.
Yeah, that's kind of how it feels like. It feels like it was, we're not sure what else to do. So I think AT is what they need.
Yeah.
And again, like I did some broad assessments that were maybe more on the OT side for them, but really it is trauma causing more than really smart kiddo, but trauma causing more than your average elevated middle and high school behaviors that are getting, them kicked out of class or getting them ISD. And again, like they have disability needs, they do, but I really feel like it's trauma related EF dysfunction, which like there's just not research out there based on that. There's lots of great EF resources, but this trauma EF AT thing is just, I'm not finding what I want out there for them.
That trauma piece is so interesting to this. I mean, it really does. It just kind of, it colors everything that you would approach this and think about. Is this an opportunity to partner with like one of your social workers?
So pretty much everybody's involved on this case.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I have our in-house behavior support. We have super involved parents in both cases. Like we've got a good team around them, but I'm just kind of struggling with like everything I put in place. I feel like we're getting kickback just from a like adolescent behavior perspective. But again, I'm trying to be sensitive to the trauma perspective. So that's a whole ball of wax. And again, like I know AT can help. I just know AT is not a magic wand.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for sure. I'm curious if anybody else, I don't see anybody else putting their microphones on. So that tells me that everybody's like, oh boy, Alyssa, that stinks for you.
I put my microphone on.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks for being brave.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I was wondering and thinking about when you were talking about this is, number one, can they have maybe a reduced schedule a little, that's an idea. And then is there one thing, like, is there one thing, one area, like just this one thing, we're going to try it in this one thing, not to use every day, not to use 100% of the time, not to use in every single encounter or whatever, but is there a time or a situation, a class, an environment or whatever, where you could try one thing and, and I don't know your relationship with these students, but, but have a somewhat frank conversation with them, hey, we're just trying this one thing, kind of be honest, so that they're, they don't want to feel duped or anything. But that, to kind of maybe temper some stuff, because they're overwhelmed as it is, I'm sure, to begin with. And so then to throw a bunch of things at
any other tool, that's why I'm super cautious about like, there are some tools I could put in place to be like, this would be great, or this would be great. But like, again, are we going to exacerbate the scenario by doing that?
Right. So that's why I
which
wonder, like, is there one thing or one area or just one section that
start
maybe
slowly rolling
just start really
all up
slowly
the
and
hill.
small, and then be very, I don't know how they would be about giving reliable feedback or something like that. But then talking, and would that help? Would that help just maybe this slow progress towards more?
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I did a little research search too, and I'm just not seeing lots of, I mean, I don't know that there's enough research in trauma, period. But this intersection of trauma and AT, I'm going to put out an all call to a couple other people who are researchers that are not me and see what they can come up with.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
I
it's really-
appreciate that input. My other question's a really fun one, and then I know you actually have kind of an agenda for today.
I don't, but well, who's who are we kidding?
It's
There
a
it is.
special event. Come on, I know it's a special
I'm
event.
trying to trick you guys by calling it
I
a special
know.
event, and I'm going to just keep wearing that down until that has no impact on anyone anymore.
No, the other one was, if you had money to spend in the area of accessible educational materials, what would you want?
Oh, that's fun.
See, I told you it was a fun one. It's a
Yeah.
spending money fun, Mike. It's
That's why
right
it's
up your
fun.
alley.
That's fun. So if I had money to spend, I'll start. And Natalie's thinking about it. I like that. She's staring up at the ceiling. That's my move too. I think that I would, if I had money to spend on AEM, what would I spend it on? I'd spend it on ongoing coaching, professional development support for all of my teachers. And then I'd leave the sliverest of money there for tools. Like other, maybe just kind of a library of examples of tools that could read AEM. But I think a lot of it would be spent on professional learning. Like I think a lot of times, and I was just having this conversation last week with a group, and they're like, we want to do a lot of training on, and this is no indictment on either of these things, by the way, they're both great. They're like, we want to do a lot of training on Bookshare and a lot of training on Learning Ally. And I'm like, okay, cool. That sounds great. Right now, how many people are using that? And they're like, well, not many. And I'm like, okay, I could see they're looking for growth. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting to spend some time working with your educators to have them have a deeper understanding of their role in providing accessible materials? Because I think that when you look at the slices of materials, yes, we have books and novels and textbooks that we read and all that, but a lot of stuff that we do is educator generated. And if that stuff's not accessible, I always feel like that's going to have more of a detrimental impact for students. Go ahead, Natalie, you put your mic on. You're done looking up at the ceiling. You got your thought.
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking the same thing would be more towards money towards training or for coaching or for that, kind of. And I like the idea of the coaching more than the training, because it seems like, somebody can come to a training and then never use anything that you've shared, any of the amazing things. But that coaching aspect is you're having that regular kind of contact. You're going in once a month or whatever, and helping them to figure things out and to see how to, implement the things, the strategies or resources or whatever that you've talked about. So, yeah, because I think you can have so many tools, you can just have so much stuff out there that's great, but if nobody really understands why or that sort of stuff. So I was thinking more like that training, coaching kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I think so
and
too.
Usually the money, it seems like the money is like really, like in that situation, an extra person, right? It's the hiring of the coach or the whatever, because everybody's stretched so thin. There's people who want to do coaching, or they can kind of be the coach in their grade level groups or whatever, but you need it for the whole building. You need it for the whole district. You need it for the whole campus. Right. And so it's the money going towards hiring that person, you know, or
That's what
people
I
in that
thought too,
department.
either towards that person or towards subs to release staff so that they can
Yeah.
come to something without this kind of panic of, oh,
Right.
what's my class doing right now? But
Mhm.
having that kind of release to be able to explore that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. I think these coaching parts, the group I was speaking to last week, the conversation went down a path of, and again, no indictment on the tool. This is just where the conversation went. I straightened it all out. I straightened something out, maybe. The person started and said, you know what's not very good? Bookshare. Its voice is not good. I was like, whoa. And I had to pump the brakes a little bit. And he said, let's dissect what you just said. Bookshare, the voice is secondary. Bookshare is a content delivery system. The voice is more about thinking about the tool that you're using with it. And what tool are you using? And the person said, I'm using a Chromebook and the voice stinks. I'm like, okay, that's the Chromebook voice. Now, if we went somewhere else into another tool and I was able to pull up my iPad and show them Voice Dream Reader with the really nice voices.
Yeah,
And
that's not Bookshare's fault. That's
exactly. Well, that's what I was getting to. I
the
wanted them to
device's
get there. I
fault.
wanted them to make that realization on their own. And I played them the voice and they said, oh, that's so much better. I wish Bookshare was like that. And I'm like, but I'm reading a Bookshare book right now. It's the content from books. And then they had the light bulb moment, like, oh, wait a second. Okay, that's the stuff. And then it gets pushed through something that gives me the audio output.
Yeah,
And
it's a
those are the
common
kind of things when I
misnomer.
think, Natalie,
Yeah.
about coaching, those are those ongoing conversations. Like Bookshare is cool. Look at all these books. Ugh, but I have to read it on my Chromebook and that stinks. I'm like, no, but it doesn't have to stink.
Right.
Use Easy Reader. There's even some good voices on that, and that's free. And so I think that there's a lot of ways for people to approach that. And I think those are some of those missing pieces.
And that's like 100% a coaching mentoring discussion, not like here's the logistics of how these tools work. Like I can train that in my sleep. I can give you a video. You don't have to listen to me.
Right? You don't have to listen.
Do it at
Go to their
2 o'clock in the
website
morning when you
and I
can't
can
go
pull
to
you
sleep,
down
right?
a 5, right? Yeah. 5-minute video of how it works. You need to pull a book down. Here's how you pull the book down. Let's talk about how you're going to use that once you've pulled the book down. I'd rather have that conversation. It's a better conversation. It's a deeper conversation. Yeah. So they had their aha moment. I felt good about things because Bookshare wasn't being slammed out there as this tool stinks. I don't know. Those kind of conversations, those kind of declarative statements always make me a little nuts when someone says that. You know what tool stinks? And then they tell you. And I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with that tool at all. It's not the right thing for you, or you're not using it effectively.
And those are two very different things. Then
Very different things.
It's a crappy tool.
So what are you thinking about spending this money on? If you come with the fun question, you must be, someone's asking you to spend money.
You know, I am thinking about the release time for staff to be able to have the conversations. And I'm not sure what that looks like. You know, in a world right now where we can't get enough teachers, let alone substitute teachers, I don't really know that we can ask for things like subs, knowing that like we have lots of long-term subs in a class anyway. Yeah. So to me, it's about, okay, how do I creatively swing it so that it's, nobody wants to do extra work, but if you're going to do extra work, getting stipended for it or getting paid at your hourly rate to do a course or something, or have these collaborative conversations. And then I think there is some fruit to whether it's ATA webinars or some of that learning that, again, can take the place of them listening to me or someone else lecture at them. Some other voices. I mean, there are, you know, I'm finding lots of great resources that don't equal money, but equal time. And so my balance is, how do I compensate people for the time that's involved in doing a thing? You know, like CAST has great modules on AIM. and and they're free and they're out there and they're all put together, and so and they can prove to me they did a thing. Like, it's not like I just watched it. There's a thing that comes with it that they have to do.
Right.
So to me, it's almost more about release time. I'm sure that, I mean, there are some resources that go with it. I think anytime I'm having the AIM conversation, I really want to have the UDL conversation. So to me, it's putting things out there. Katie Novak just released the 3rd edition of UDL Now. So it's like some of those resources where I want to kind of put out the broaden the conversation a little bit about the why of AIM and how do we do that in a UDL framework. I don't know. I think bigger and bigger and bigger when I think about things like that. So I need
think that's
somebody
the-
to rein my conversation in a little, which is why I asked the question.
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation. And I think this idea of thinking broader with it allows it to connect to more people. That AIM conversation is still going to feel very narrow, even though it shouldn't be. It should be wide. But I feel like when people hear AIM, they equate that to disability. And it's only about those kids. I didn't even bother to air quote it. I felt like my voice air quoted it enough. It's only that one subset of students, but wrapping that into the conversation of UDL broadens the thought about that. Well, like, oh, wait a second. If I'm making my materials accessible, i.e. readable, anybody could open their Chromebook and have it read out loud because it's going to read correctly to anyone, regardless of their need. And those kind of things. Scout, I saw you join the party and you turned your mic on. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm new to the group, but I have a question. What would you define as the difference between coaching and training? Individualized?
That's such a great question. That's such a great.
No, but it leads to the next thought. So I just like I'm actually just like, what's the difference?
In my mind, I think that training doesn't always have to be, but is thought of in a lot of people's minds as a hit and run. I sat there, I checked the box, I left.
Right.
And so whenever I would approach training, I am always approaching it with a coaching mindset anyway. So it's training is part A, and then part B, C, D, E, and F are everything that follows. That's all part of what we're doing. But I think it's getting others, and I see you guys shaking their heads. So then everybody else must think that way too. That's good. There's some positive reinforcement I liked. What do you think, Alyssa? Same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to, I mean, maybe I use the word training every once in a while, but I think when we use the word like professional development opportunity,
Yeah.
I tend to land in that lane because while I do have to do that practical, like here's how you use Snap and Read, here's how you use whatever, like nothing I've done in the last couple of years has been framed solely on here's a training where you're going to come learn a tool. It's okay, we're going to do this series on access to curriculum and emergent writing, the comprehensive literacy for all stuff. And that's going to then involve, you're doing this project, somebody's going to come and coach and mentor you. You're doing this project, somebody's going to come coach and mentor you. Yes, I'm going to train you on how you use Book Creator to make a book, but like, it's more this structured coaching and mentoring that happens to cover tools.
Yeah.
I agree, in my example of training that is just like, wow, that's so great. And then I leave and do nothing is watching Therese Wilcom for the first time, where I was like, wow, so much stuff. And went home and did nothing different because it was just, I felt like it was too much.
Yeah.
Not to diss her.
But it's
I find
overwhelming when you see something like that for the first time and you go,
whatever
like,
it is.
oh,
Yeah. Right. It causes this seismic shift in your brain. Like, well, wait a second. Is everything I know wrong? Am I doing everything wrong? How can I apply this? And then that becomes much too large to wrap your brain around.
But I think the like, how do you go from any kind of training to actual implementations? That's why I was asking about coaching, because if coaching is one-on-one at some point, and could it be, can it happen in the classroom? Does that ever happen? This is not an area, I don't work in schools.
Mhm.
Does that happen where you actually go into the classroom and say, this is how I use this with this kid, this individual? Is that a thing?
It is a thing. I think it's a thing. I think it should be a thing more than it probably is. I think that any of your professional learning that you see positive impact from has some component of that. Whether it's I'm going into the classroom, physically going in, or providing feedback to them about their practice once they took it back to their classroom.
Yeah.
And so there are moments where you don't necessarily have to go to their classroom to get a sense of what they're doing. But it does mean you have to be somewhat intentional with your thought of how are you extending this learning? What's that next step? What are the artifacts they're going to create? And how are you going to provide feedback on that and continue their learning? Because like you said, if it's just all information coming one way, and then you're like, okay, cool. Like imagine that, Scout, you're in something and you get a ton of info. And you sort through it in your head and you go, all right, I'm going to try this one thing that I learned. But then there's nowhere to bring that one thing. Like, hey, I did this thing. What does anybody think? Am I on the right track? Is that going to change my practice? And ultimately, our job with any of this professional learning is to help people change their practice and make it better, make it more efficient for them, make it more effective for the people they're working with. Students, adults, community school, doesn't matter. It's how do you make sure that these new concepts affect change in some way, hopefully a good way.
This
Yeah.
conversation is extremely timely for me because starting this week, I'm spending time we're targeting the areas, but in programs, working with them and mentoring them and coaching, because we don't have release time. We don't have time available for training time at this point here. So that's the only way they're going to understand everything we're trying to put out.
And then it becomes like, Lori, then it's more of a PLC. It's a
Mhm.
professional learning community. What is everybody doing? What's working?
Exactly.
What's not working? How can we
Exactly.
help each other as we go forward?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's all that question asking.
Yeah. And question asking, I dropped in the chat, one of Mike and I's favorite books, Everyday Instructional Coaching, 7 Daily Drivers to Support Teacher Effectiveness.
I love it.
At this point, you'd think we'd be getting some kind of kickback from them.
I don't understand.
People we've
That
sent
guy
their
put a new
way.
book out and I had to physically buy it. I kept waiting for it to just show up at my house, like as a thank you, and it didn't. So I just bought it. But yeah, I hear you.
No, but that one, I think, because it's a small chunk, it wasn't a huge read.
Right.
I think I on the daily basis go back to things that were in that, how I'm asking the questions, what questions I'm asking. And I don't, even though it says teacher effectiveness, like I don't know that it would be limited to just for how we're doing instruction. It's how we're doing the work we're doing to help people who are helping people. And again, like I don't think it was explicit to that. I mean, I have a whole slew of favorites, but that one rises to the top because it's not as meaty as some of the like Jim Knight stuff or some of the other stuff. Like it's not as philosophical. It's very practical. I don't
It is
know.
very
Mike,
practical. I agree.
you know.
Another practical one, I had to get up. I actually moved it off my desk today to try to clean up a little. And now, of
Oh my
course, I need it.
goodness.
So it's going to end up right back here on my desk. Is The Coaching Habit by Michael Stanier. The Say Less, Ask More, and Change the Way You Lead Forever. And it's basically about 8 questions and how you would apply them to what you're doing. I'm trying to find the one thing that tells me all 8, and I'll give you all 8, but I got to find the page that explains them. But yeah, I mean, these are the kind of things, you know, when I think of what Lori was talking about, this is almost basically what you go into those conversations with. This is what you have in your back pocket. Like, hey, everyone, how's it going? Like, what's happening? How can I help you? How can you help you? What else do you need from me in order to be successful? I mean, those are the ways that you're going to get people to change their thoughts. Alyssa, thanks for throwing that in. Yeah.
Not a
That's it.
problem.
A little blue and yellow book. There it is. I wish I could. I'll turn my thing off for a second. I always laugh. You know, a book is really good because this does not look, not all my books look like this. But when a book looks like this on its edge, that's a good book. It's got a lot of Post-it notes in there. And yes, they're color coded. I just happen to have all those colors at one time. But yeah, it's really good. That idea of how you can break those things down and ask those questions of people. And it's funny, I had someone say to me, you know, coaching must be the easiest presentations you do, which is funny because coaching is not a presentation, but okay, I got what they were saying. They said coaching must be the easiest presentation you do because you don't have to prep anything and you just sit there. And I was like, well, I don't really just sit there, but okay. And I would argue I probably don't have to prep much. But I would say you probably work a whole lot harder because you're trying to make those connections for people and you're trying to, you know, that strategy of active listening that whole time and finding ways to empower them to move forward. Because ultimately, I'm not going to be there with them. They're going to be there by themselves. I'll be there most times virtually. I think, Laura, you have a nice opportunity there. And even Alyssa, which she was talking about, because you're there. I think those are really powerful because you're in that space with them and you can be in that space with them.
Don't ever underestimate the ability of something when you can be there.
Yeah.
Much different than when I was bouncing around and saying, you know, emailing, hey, try this, and, you know, not knowing.
Or even different than this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tend to do a lot of those coaching and mentoring things virtually because they're just geographically away from where I am. And that's not as easy all the time. Because you can't kind of read the room and read the glances and read where people are at and sense sometimes their just their barrier, their frustration. It's really funny. 2 weeks ago, I had someone, we were doing something like it was a team coaching and only one person showed up from the team. That was part of their frustration, but we got through that. And at one point in the middle of our Zoom conversation, she shut her camera off for a second, but not her mic. And I heard this kind of, and then she turned the camera back on and she was smiling. And I was like, how's it going over there? Because you forgot to turn your mic off too. And she was mortified. And I was like, don't be, that's fine. This is a good time for us to do that. To get a little deeper into it. And I said to her, you were almost off the hook. Because if I was there with you, I would have seen you do that. You would have physically leave the room in order to do that. Your little moment of just exhale. But we had a really good conversation after that about how she could re-engage her team members because she was feeling an incredible level of frustration. The team, as she pointed out, talked big, produced little. And that was incredibly frustrating for her because she's been one that has come to everything. And her team members kind of pop in and out. Like on a day where all the team members pop in, I'm like, whoa, wait a second. It's a big day. We got all of us here. But most times it's this one lady all the time and a smattering of her other team members. And that is obviously incredibly frustrating for her. And so we spent our time talking about that. But it's, you know, I would much rather be in a space with someone to do that.
I think it changes the level of trust. And you know, like if you're in the room, she's more likely to say, man, this is hard some days.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
you had to kind of catch her.
Yeah, well, I did have to catch her. Yeah, I mean, I felt really guilty about catching her because she didn't want to be caught. I mean, she thought she had nailed that down to give me a moment, to get a moment away from me, and she hadn't. But yeah, I think it is interesting. I mean, I think that, you know, I had shared a picture last week on Twitter. I was in Michigan last week for 2 days doing like a retreat about a project that I'm working on. And we decided to do it live, the three of us, instead of doing it virtual. And I would have to say it was probably 1,000 times better than it would have been if we were virtual. We would have got things done, but we were in that same space in a little meeting room in a Holiday Inn, locked into this little space together with a small whiteboard, a lot of Post-it notes, and just conversation. And we got so much done in 2 days because it was live and we were able to bounce off each other and think about how this would look going forward. And it was just, yeah, live. You can't beat it. You can't.
I know when I was working in the schools, it seems like there were a couple instances where there was, Scout, you mentioned trust, like there was so much trust with a group of teachers across the whole building, but also kind of within our own individual like grade level groups or specialist groups or whatever. And one time there was going around, there was this like process called critical friends, and it was more critical as in necessary to have, like vital, right? And so, and there were all these little processes that we would get together, like there was a release time for it. This was the thing, there was a release time for it. And there were all these little like processes and little, what do I want to say? Like just little scenarios or whatever, just all these little things that you could kind of read stuff and then go through these, answer these questions or talk about how you would apply it to your teaching or to your role and that sort of stuff. And it was the same group, like there were like 8 of us or whatever. We met once a month for like the entire school year. So, we had like 8 meetings. And there were these trust kind of things that we would do. And then this was a time where like talking about how do you do that? How do you do teachers ever come into a classroom and apply things in the classroom? So this was a group of us who we would be invited into each other's, spaces because that level of trust had been set, right? So, and then there was another time where there was money, and this was kind of a contractual thing. Like there was where we had, it was after hours, but you were paid for it. So you kind of paid advance for it, but the implication was that those under contract, you'd be spending this X amount of hours after school time to do it. And that was another one where it was more PLC. It was a PLC. You were with that same group of educators and you met 4 or 5 or 6 times or whatever, throughout the school year for like an hour and a half each time to kind of, and you had like your goal or your theme the things that you were kind of addressing. And so those 2 times, I mean, there was so much trust built between all of us and everybody could get vulnerable about their frustrations or I'm just not getting it or kind of whatever. And they were saying how so much more effective they felt in the classrooms, after this time. But unfortunately, it's like those are the kinds of things that get cut first, right? When budgets get tight, well, there's no money. We can't pay you for that because we have to do this, that, or the other. But it seems like that's what people want the most is those times to collaborate. And then your practice, whatever it is, being a teacher, being a paraeducator. I mean, some of these we had paraeducators got paid to be involved in, your role as like a related service provider, you are so much more effective in what you do, how you carry out that role when you've had some of these experiences with these people that you're working with. But on the district level, on the paper level, right? When you look at the bottom line number, it's the dollar figure, right? That's how the district sees it, not necessarily. So, they don't see the benefit of, over time, maybe will it save them money if you have all these effective, highly effective teachers and these, will it save them money over time? I don't know. But anyway, those, so those were the couple of times that I can think of when I was working in the schools that were just valuable times, and the relationships I had with those people allowed me to be vulnerable, them to be vulnerable and work through our frustrations or issues or share in celebrations. And it was pretty great. It was really a great experience to have.
Those are great. And I agree with you 100%. Those would be the first things that people would shut down as something to save money. And I almost think, Alyssa, going back to your question with your anonymous-y kind of, if you were given money, but I'm sensing I'm convinced you've been asked to spend money for something. If you went back and didn't have things as part of your money spending, I don't know how receptive people are going to be to that. Like, what do you mean? It's just meeting with each other and just talking. The
Yeah,
thing
I think
Natalie
it
just
has to
described
be-
sounds amazing, but as
Yeah.
administrator, be like, whoa, I'm not paying you
Yeah.
to sit around and chat with each other.
Yeah, I think it would have to be seated in a larger cell of like, here's, part A, part B, part C, part D, all of which include some structured coaching and mentoring opportunities. However, part A, B, C, and D have some kind of other deliverable that's not just the coaching and mentoring, because
Right.
God forbid they
Some
can't
kind of
have
thing.
that
If
opportunity.
it was AIM, we're going to purchase accessibility checker software, and we're going to work that into our professional learning plan so everybody builds and creates accessible materials. Within that plan is a whole bunch of conversation. But look, we
Right.
bought something. Look at that over there. We bought it.
It's almost frustrating to listen to this, I will.
Yeah.
It is, it's like how Natalie, when you're talking, it's like you're talking about these good things. I moved from a job where I was like incredibly busy, just incredibly busy, to my current job where I do a lot of work, but I have this invaluable time to think. And that's how I frame it, is, oh my God, I can't even remember, because I used to teach. I can't even remember when I've had a job where I've had time to think.
Mhm.
And that's what it sounds like you're doing, not only having time to think, but to collaborate and to listen to like how it has to be framed to give this valuable resource to teachers is a little bit sad.
It
I
is
mean,
it is
fact.
really interesting, right? This whole idea of I even look at these things we do on Mondays. Like, I think all of us that come to this find a way to make this happen every week. But yet I also think that every one of us, if an administrator saw this was an hour you were spending your time, I feel like you'd have to justify this at a pretty good level. Maybe not me and Naomi, because Naomi would have to talk to me and I would be like, yeah, I think this is perfect. But I think besides that, like, Alyssa, like you're a therapist in a school and yet you come all the time.
So I purposed very carefully on Monday with my time and made it my most of the time, unless there's a holiday, office day,
Mhm.
which gives me that flexibility to do this. My role is wonky. I wouldn't say that I am a full-time therapist at a school, because I have half of our district that I cover for assistive technology, and then I'm in charge of the coaching and mentoring of our 20 OTs and PTs and all of the things that go with working with them. So I have a little more flexibility than your average therapist in the schedule role, but I still have to kind of fight to not give away that hour every week. And the weeks that I don't have opportunities to engage with my colleagues makes a dramatic difference in where my mindset is.
Yeah. I would
And
think
so if
so.
anybody were to push back, which I haven't, because nobody really knows what my schedule is or what I do. I would sell it from that angle, tell me what professional development this district is providing that meets my needs.
Yeah.
And if you can give me that, okay, fine, I will attend that and not this. But I make the case personally to myself, this is an important hour, and not, it doesn't always happen. Like, there are definitely weeks where other things get scheduled for me, but if I have control over that time I block it out, it's on my calendar, and I make that attempt, because I do feel like it's important to be able to just have these conversations. So the same thing that's critically important for our educators and our staff is they're trying to work through, what does AIM look like, or what does AT look like? is just as important for us to be able to critically have these conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Mary, I am in Alachua County in Florida, where the University of Florida is, in Gainesville.
Lori said that she takes things back every week. I agree. I take something out of this every week. I could easily assign value to this. It would not take very long. If I was to hang up at 1 and someone asked me at 1:05, what did I learn that day and how can I use it? It would be pretty quick to explain it. It would not be hard. These are important things.
The topic today is exactly what was decided on Thursday. I mean,
It's great. Look at that. You're welcome, Lori. I'm so glad
Thank
we
you.
can be that responsive to you.
Thank you. I was going to ask questions. That's perfect. You answered them all.
So what else, Lori? You got to do something next. So what else?
I don't know yet. I'll let you know in a little while. I'm
Right,
sitting
that's
here.
fair.
The
Gives
other
you
way I
something
use my
to
time
think
is I'm
about.
cutting out laminate while I'm listening.
It's
Has
just,
to get cut.
yeah, it's really interesting how you start to think about this. Yeah, I love these kind of conversations. I think they're so important. I think that for anybody who's done training, you find that a lot of times to not feel as rewarding as it could be. And that's when you start to redefine what is training in your mind. And then, I think I've done that successfully in my own brain of that, it rarely is a training, a drive-by. Like, oh, I'm here and it's been 45 minutes and I'll catch you another time and then I'm out. But instead it's part of, and I like Alyssa just in the way she thinks about it. She didn't even realize she said it this way. Talks about training as a series. And right away that changes the view of what it means to participate in a training, because it is not just one.
We've all been forced, cajoled, demanded to be present at a sit and get training
Right.
that did not apply to your practice, or if it did apply to your practice, there was no implementation that happened afterwards. And to me, that's a wasted day of professional development.
Yeah.
And I know there are some things like, okay, you roll out a new student information system or a new IEP system, like you have to do the actual practical sit and get thing. But again, even those things, like, I don't think, like, we're getting ready to roll out changes to our IEP system, statewide system. And I don't think that's going to be successful unless there are people available for open office hours the first couple of weeks when that rolls out to be like, okay, I tried this and this didn't work. So to me, every professional development opportunity should be that way. I know that that isn't always the case, but I think the more that you can pair it with just, even if it's not structured and it's just, I'm available, like, this is when I'm in my office, you could, like, here's the Zoom link, you're all invited to this training, like, pop in whenever you want to and ask a question. Like, even if that opportunity is there, I think we're gaining on it. Because, and again, like, I wish there were more opportunities in my day to do that. And I do, it's on my list for next year for all of the kids we have using AT in certain categories to have, here's an open office hour for AT for writing. If you have a question, pop in. If I sit there and I get other things done and one person shows up, okay, fine. But I just, without that other opportunity, I don't know that we're doing right by the students that need it, because we're leaving our staff to just kind of try to figure it out on their own.
Yeah. That's why I like when I think about, even for those opportunities where someone says, we only want to see you, we only want you to come out one time. Maybe they want to see me more after that, but it's just like one time, work with our group, share a bunch of information, and then kind of move along. And so when I think about how that gets delivered to people, I'm a big fan of the techniques from the accelerated learning principles with Dave Meyer. If you look that up, Dave Meyer is the accelerated learning handbook. And it's 4 phases, but the 3 that matter, kind of the training part, present the information, practice it while you're there, and then give them some kind of performance piece. Like, okay, now that you've done this, what happens when you leave today? And how does that circulate back into what you do? And then it becomes prepare, present, practice, and perform. And then it becomes a circle. Because I think that is the key. So even on those times where someone says, oh, this is only a one-time thing. I'm notorious for putting that at the end of my presentations. It's a slide that says, now what? Or next step. Or how, just what are you going to do now? And leave time for that. I think honoring that question with at least 5 or 10 minutes in a presentation, depending on the length of your presentation, shows people how important that is. It's not just the Q&A part at the end. No, it's a dedicated part of that learning experience. What are you going to do? How is this going to change what you do? And I think that goes back to that reflection piece. And I know that was our kind of topic for the day, but we got there. It took us 50 minutes, but we got there. But that idea of taking some time to reflect and not just move to the next thing, but instead take some time to say, all right, well, what did I get out of that? And how will that change what I do? Whether that happens in the car as you leave somewhere or in a quiet moment of the day. You write yourself a note and then sit back and think about it a little bit, but just that idea of taking some next steps with information. I think that demonstrates that the information shared had some value. Like I've gone to staff in-service days, right? And somebody talks at you for 58 out of the 60 minutes, and then you just quickly rotate to another topic. Someone talks at you for another 58 or 60 minutes, and you just keep moving through. Reflection might not be part of that conversation because sometimes those are just like, oh, everybody had to do this training today, and everybody had to do this training today, and everybody did it. Congrats, everybody, we did it. We're successful. And that's just, that to me is what training is. So we need a better word. Right now, we got to think about that. What's our better word? I'm sorry, the guy's doing my lawn. He's decided to fertilize my lawn right now. If you hear it outside, that's what he's doing. All right, you got 7 minutes before we can break for the day. What else do people want to talk about?
I just invited the DPS, Detroit Public Schools coordinator, to your meeting for June.
Great.
Yeah.
At some point, and then this is a good conversation too. At some point, we're going to stop for the summer.
Right.
Naomi and I thought today might be the day we stop. Maybe that won't be the day we stop. I do know that I wanted to host one on June 13th, another special event, because myself and the other authors of Inclusive Learning 365 are doing an inclusive road trip to ISTE, where Text Help is sponsoring us, and we're going to drive together and stop all along the way and do little social media things and stuff. But we wanted to kick it off that day, so we will come back for the 13th.
What about community college? Do you think that would be appropriate for them to? I know the disability coordinator there.
Is it appropriate for a county college person to come to this?
Yeah.
Sure. Look, there's one right there. It's Natalie.
Oh,
She's right
okay.
below me. I don't know if it's a community college, but Natalie's from a college.
The Mary Scout or?
I'm at a university, but yeah, I
Oh,
feel
okay.
like I'm trying to take on higher education.
Right.
So
Okay.
And you are
Okay.
just right below me, Natalie. So I can
Okay.
go,
But
"There she is,
everybody's
right
grid
there."
is different, Mike. Everybody's grid is
Hey,
different.
I'm only living in my world, so it's Natalie's right there.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah,
listen,
I'm
you're
really
right
really
there.
interested in transition. So transition to young adult. That's my thing. I guess that's what I like best. Although I have experience in everything, that's really where I like to work.
I think these conversations are broad enough at times. I mean, even Scout said it before. Scout doesn't necessarily work in education, but he works in this kind of field of assistive technology. And so I think all of these things, there's ways to apply this, whether it's education, higher ed, community living, employment. These things are very flexible, these ideas of what we're talking about. and just the idea of infusing technology into someone's experience, life experience to be successful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I really like the OWAM, last week. The
Yeah,
online
that was
writing
great.
assessment.
Yeah, if you guys weren't here last week, yeah, check out the recording for that with Bridget and her online assessment of writing methods, which was awesome. That was fun.
And I just wondered if anybody was doing anything with that, because she sounded like she wanted help. Would that involve like maybe the New York schools or something, a big school district? Or do we have to use Pearson education assessment or?
Yeah, I think she's just looking for, without speaking for her, but this is my impression of what she's looking for. She's looking for practitioners to just use this more and give some feedback of what you would like to see in it. I think it's great, but I also don't do a lot of direct student consultation anymore. And so
Yeah.
I don't get to use it. I've used her old system, which was also really good, but really much more difficult to navigate than this one. This one's actually really nice.
Yeah, I gave her information to and I forwarded her email to an advocacy lawyer in San Diego.
Awesome.
Because I think maybe that's a way where you can introduce a new assessment.
Yeah, I think like anything else, it's these opportunities to spread this information wide, so that people know about these things, and it makes them start to approach what they do a little differently, right? Same idea of what we talked about first thing today. Providing enough information that someone can make a decision of how to be better, right? What was our thing, Alyssa, in the very beginning? What was it? When you know more, you do better.
When you know better, you do better.
Thank you.
I wasn't here, but
I
I'm
was
getting
messing it
know
up. Yeah,
better,
I was lost in a loop there in my brain and I couldn't get out of it. Yeah. And you know, it's that same kind of idea is how we continue to push this forward, to help people come to those moments of realization like, oh, I can be better at what I do. Look, we've successfully spent Alyssa's money today. And I think that's a success in itself. So
I knew it wasn't going to be hard for y'all.
yeah, come on, that was easy. And it wasn't even self-serving. Like I didn't even say something like you should hire me to come down. I wasn't even looking at that. I'm just saying you should bring somebody in. You should do those kinds of things with it. I think that's perfect. It makes perfect sense. So, all right, last thoughts. And I'm being incredibly self-serving because I have a meeting at 1:00 to resolve my funding issue that I cannot be late for because I would like to see my program get paid today. So I'm going to
Kind of
work
important.
on that. All right. So next week is Memorial Day. Don't show up. Well, you could show up. I don't know where you're going to show up because there's no link, but you can try to show up somewhere, but don't. How about we take off the 6th and we come back on the 13th? Let's do that. That kind of special eventy thing. And then maybe we'll wrap for the summer.
We have an event on the 7th too, don't forget.
What's on the 7th?
7th?
Yep, I'm looking, wait a minute.
Heck's on the 7th? I don't even know. what day it is.
Roundtable discussion on favorite AAC apps for iPad. Is that you? Well, that may not be you.
Oh, no, it is me. It is me. But
Okay.
yeah, that's something different. Yeah, that is me
So,
too. Yeah, sorry. Thanks for helping me with my calendar. I appreciate it.
So glad we could help you out here.
Yeah,
We
June
all
7th.
sign
I don't
up-
look
we
that
all
far.
Sign on and it's like.
It would have to have been tomorrow for me to know about it. I need to
To
just
very
tomorrow.
firmly know where he was going and what he was doing. Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what
completely
Friday holds
identify
for
with
me.
that.
I don't know any of that stuff. It's today and tomorrow, and that's all I know.
All right. Good luck, Mike.
Okay,
All right,
bye.
everyone. It was a pleasure as always. Enjoy the week. Enjoy that day off next week. Yeah, don't do work. See ya.